Hello, and welcome to my channel. My name is Jonathan Cohn, and today I will be discussing my top 10 canon Star Wars novels. Now, Star Wars is a bit interesting in that you have two universes at the moment. You have their Legends line, which went from really and essentially 1991 to about 2013, early 2014. That included almost 150 adult novels, and that's not even including the YA or middle grade books, which there were a ton. So it was a long time with lots of books. Then in 2014, they did the reset, and they had now what's called the canon. The expanded universe before became Legends, and the new stuff became canon. And so today I will be talking about the canon. I will eventually do a video talking about my top 10 Legends books and my top Legends series and whatnot, but right now I'm focusing on my top 10 Star Wars canon novels. There have been about 50 between the adult and YA. I typically prefer the adult canon novels to the YA ones for a myriad of reasons that I'm not going to get into now, but there are two YA books on my list, and everything else on my list is adult novels. And so, without further ado, why don't I get into it? The first book on my list, my number 10 book, is Leia, Princess of Alderaan. It is by Claudia Gray. It was released in 2017. This is a book that was part of the journey to The Last Jedi, although it could have not been that, and it would have been fine. It focuses on Leia as she is becoming a junior senator, and it focuses on her just making mistakes and figuring out things about the rebellion. And her parents, her adoptive parents, the Organas, are part of the rebellion, but she doesn't know, and she's trying to wiggle her way in somehow. And there's a little romance in this with one of the other junior senators. There's also a good friendship. Amilyn Holdo, who a lot of people didn't like in The Last Jedi, is a little kid in this. She's also one of the junior senators. She's very much like Luna Lovegood from the Harry Potter series. This is just a delightful book. It was a breath of fresh air in a time when I wasn't enjoying the YA books that were coming out. And this was also 2017 when everything was hitting the New York Times list for Star Wars. And this is one of those amazing books. Claudia Gray, everyone loves her YA. I prefer her adult, as you'll see later on, but her books are always fantastic reads and well worth it. She really is the queen of Star Wars novels right now. The next book on my list to discuss is another YA, which is Star Wars Ahsoka. This was the number one New York Times bestseller from E.K. Johnston from 2016. This broke all the records for Star Wars. It was a huge, huge bestseller. This came right after they, quote, killed Ahsoka in Rebels, and at the end of season 2, and we were like, oh my goodness, we're never going to see Ahsoka again. So to get this book was, as I said earlier with another book, a breath of fresh air. It was so wonderful, and E.K. Johnston turned in this little book. There's not much meat to it, but it is just a fun ride. And it really does, this book does things that the last season of Clone Wars tried to do, where Ahsoka in this book is off, she's by herself, it's after Order 66, and she's trying to find her place if she's not going to be a Jedi. It's kind of like a New Dawn or Kenobi in that sense that there's no other Jedi around, and she's trying to figure out, what am I going to do if I can't be a Jedi? And so she goes to this planet, Rayeda, and she makes some friends with two girls there, which, ironically, there's two girls in the last season of Clone Wars that people didn't like. If you didn't like those episodes, this does that story concept, but better. And there are Inquisitors that show up, and it's not an action-heavy novel. It's not a plot-heavy novel, but you really understand Ahsoka. And the audiobook actually is done by the actress who voiced Ahsoka in the Clone Wars. It's Ashley Eckstein. And so the audiobook is also interesting. It doesn't have the same production quality of the other Star Wars books, but still a very good book, and I highly recommend this. The next on my list is a bit unique because it is a novelization, and this is the novelization of Rogue One. Now, this was written by Alexander Freed. I have not liked any of Alexander Freed's other novels that he's written, but this one was, in my opinion, the best of the novelizations to come out of the new era. It expands quite a bit on small details from the movie, particularly some of the senators and what they were talking about. It includes some backstory for Jyn. It connects very much so to Catalyst and to some other Star Wars novels, and it's just a very good novelization. It fleshes out enough. It doesn't add too much, and it doesn't go crazy, but it still adds quite a lot to the story, and is still true and faithful to the plot of Rogue One. And by the way, I just love this type of a poster design. Like, I much prefer pastel colors for my books, but when this one is basically a poster, and it's, I think, a really well done poster. So this book by Alexander Freed, it's the only novelization on my list, but it is a good novelization. The next book on my list is Thrawn, Treason. This book is the third book in the new canon Thrawn trilogy, and it is interesting because I have some friends who like this book the best of that trilogy. I think it's really good, but not the best, and this book showed Timothy Zahn can write military science fiction. He writes military stuff better than any other author, and I just think that his deductions that Thrawn uses, the way he uses Eli Vanto, who becomes a standout character in this book, is just great. This came out in 2019, so it's fairly recent, but it's still a fantastic book. It's very short. It's only about 300 pages, and yet it packs quite a wallop. The next book on my list is another Claudia Gray book. The number 6 on my list is Bloodline. This was released in early 2016, right after The Force Awakens came out. And this came out at a time when they did not know where they were going with the sequels. And yet, Claudia Gray did a fantastic job working with what she could to show Leia forming the rebellion. And it's just an interesting book. There's adventure, there's high stakes, there's politics. Claudia Gray does a fantastic job at writing politics. She nails Leia's voice. It's also a bit tragic, this book, and I don't want to give anything away, but there's just some unfortunate things, particularly with Leia's bloodline that you learn about. And so for being a book where she wasn't allowed to write anything important on the greater universe and she was very tied down because they didn't know where they were going, this book was really well done. The next book on my list, my number 5, is called Catalyst, a Rogue One novel. It is by James Luceno. Luceno wrote a ton of EU Legends novels, and Luceno, this, in my opinion, is his best work. I also think that if we're talking about media tie-in fiction, we're talking about books that are specifically about tying into another property. Their job is to tell an important story, to advance the characters, while at the same time making you appreciate the original, and if not anything, enhancing the original more so that you like the original better because you read the ancillary material. This book does that better than any other project. It goes through the story of Galen and Lyra Erso, as well as Orson Krennic, and they're weaving in and out of storylines where Galen and Lyra are just wanting to be scientists exploring, and they get exploited by Orson and his friendship with them to help them build the Death Star. And you have them realize what the issue is with the Death Star and realize how terrible it is. And so you see Galen and Lyra try to escape. And it's not an action-heavy novel, but it is a plot-heavy novel. And there are a ton of references, like a metric ton of references in this book to other Star Wars properties and to even Legends and some canon references too. And it's just, it's a tragic book, but it really ties in well to Rogue One. I read this before Rogue One, and I had such appreciation for it. And I had friends who didn't read it, and they saw Rogue One, and they liked Rogue One, but then after reading this book, they loved Rogue One even more. And so I highly recommend Catalyst. The number 4 book on my list is John Jackson Miller's A New Dawn. It is a Rebels tie-in book. This book is a fantastic story, very action-heavy, very plot-driven. It doesn't get too much into character work from the main characters. There are some side characters. It has the best Star Wars villain, Count Vidian. Forget the old way. You will remember that during this book. It also, in this book, introduced Rey Sloane, another fantastic character who showed up in the Aftermath novels. And this book does a really good job of setting up Kanan and Hera's connection and them meeting each other. It's a getting to know you novel where there's an inciting incident and they're thrust together into this action piece, and they have to work together to stop the Empire from doing some things on this planet. Ironically, it's on a sun that never rises. Another cool piece of information, this was the first canon novel. This came out in mid-2014. It came out right before Rebels debuted, and John Jackson Miller is my favorite tie-in author and is in my top 5 favorite authors of all time, no matter what the genre, and he just did a wonderful job with this book. The next book on my list is another repeat author. It is Timothy Zahn's Thrawn. I believe this is the Barnes & Noble edition, so normally this is a white background book, but I got the Barnes & Noble version, which was really nice. And this book has such great quotes, such great mystery. It's basically a mystery novel in Star Wars. It tells of how Thrawn got involved in the Empire, and this book makes you root for Thrawn as a good guy, and it just tells such a good story. And this introduces you to Eli Vanto, who is one of the most beloved characters in the canon now, and it's like Sherlock Holmes and Watson if Sherlock actually wanted to teach Watson, not just make fun of him. And so this book is my number 3. It is just wonderful. Now, my number 2 book, going back to this author's already been on here twice, but it's because she's that good a Star Wars author, and that's Claudia Gray's Master and Apprentice. You get Qui-Gon, you got Obi-Wan, you got them going on adventures, you got them dealing with this political crisis. Claudia Gray writes Qui-Gon's voice excellently. He's one of her favorite characters. She also writes political intrigue well, and she just understands the Jedi on a scale that nobody else does. This book introduces some new characters who are interesting, but it really focuses on some old characters that we know. She writes Yoda really well. I love the artwork for this. This is the type of Star Wars artwork that I love the most, when it's very pastel colored. And this book, it asks deep questions while still being a fun novel. If you were a fan of the Jedi Apprentice novels back in the early 2000s, you will be a fan of this book. It is just delightful. Now, I have to give an asterisk on my final book because it's actually 2 books. The reason for this is I've read these both recently, I've reread these both recently, and I still don't know which one is my favorite because they're both so close and so connected, and you'll understand why in a second. My number 1, which is a tie, is between The High Republic's Light of the Jedi by Charles Soule and The Rising Storm by Cavan Scott. These are both the first 2 adult novels in the High Republic. There's many more novels in the High Republic. Behind me we have Out of the Shadows by Justina Ireland and Into the Dark by Claudia Gray. Those were some of the other YA novels, as well as some of the middle grades like Race to Crash Point Tower and A Test of Courage and other books. But the 2 adult novels, which were Light of the Jedi and The Rising Storm, were the best books because they told the Jedi doing what Jedi do. And it showed epicness and awesome action, and it showed political intrigue, but it gave us an interconnected story. The biggest problem I have with the canon is you have maybe a little trilogy here or standalone novels here, but they all tell a very personal story with 1 or 2 characters as the focus or point of view characters, and they tell very small in scope. There's no galaxy-wide disasters. There's no big enemies that you're dealing with. There's no big threats. There's nothing that could ripple into future Star Wars projects. Like, nothing from the other books is going to go into the Star Wars television series or movies. The High Republic will, because it has stories of consequence to the greater galaxy. And I just love them. It brings back the feeling that I got reading the old New Jedi Order books and the Legacy of the Force books and even the original Thrawn trilogy. These books, I feel like they're so big and epic that they make me feel like I'm watching a Star Wars movie, which is exactly what Star Wars books should do. They should give you that feeling of epicness to them. And so I don't know which one's my number one. I really don't. I could not tell you which one I like better, but I like both of them. 10 out of 10. Love both of them. So these are all of my top 10 Star Wars canon novels. 2 YAs, one novelization, and the other 7, actually 8, are adult novels. If you liked this video, please subscribe to the channel and like the video and share it. And comment down below, are there any books I should be considering that I'm not? Do you have other books that you really like in the Star Wars canon? Do you not read the canon? Are you looking for a place to start? Because I have some good starting points. Not all of these are good starting points, but some of them are. But let me know what you think. And until next time, I'm Jonathan, and thank you for watching.